Great. Hi, everyone. Every day, all over the world, people build houses, prepare food, fix things, care for each other, and invent novel solutions to problems. This, by the way, is something that's called jugaad in Hindi. It's a word that means the flexible and frugal repurposing of objects to solve new problems. That's a toilet bowl plunger attached to the roof of a vehicle for stability. We don't understand how humans do these things. We don't know how to get robots to do them. And the embodied, should I speak up? Oh, I'm not mic'd, okay. Does this work if I talk here? Or should I attach a device? Okay, good, I'll do this. And so the Embodied Intelligence mission aims to tackle both problems synergistically. And as Jim has noted, the North Star here is, imagine a robot that solves problems and learns new tasks in open settings like homes, construction sites, or disaster areas, just as quickly as a person can, with its internal processing mechanisms that mirror those operating in the human brain. So there's two very different strategies you could take to solve these kinds of problems. Imagine at the simplest level, you have some kind of image input and a goal, and you're trying to figure out what action to take. So, for example, imagine you're looking at a scene like this, and you're trying to figure out where might the orange be hiding in this scene. So you have to figure out which object you would move first to find the orange. Well, one way you might do that is the traditional one that's made all the successes in AI recently, is just train a system end-to-end to do the thing. When you train a system end-to-end to do the thing, it does the thing pretty well. So you could do that here. That's called a model-free system because you don't build in any structure, you just train it end-to-end. An alternative is the one that Josh and Jim have been talking about, that you first actually try to estimate the state of the world. Build some kind of internal model of the 3D structure of the world, and maybe including the 3D structure of the occluded parts of objects, and then use that world model to do some kind of spatial reasoning to figure out where the orange might be hidden. So that's a model-based approach. And so Leslie's lab has been comparing these two approaches in robots.
Great. We're doing tag team here. Okay, so this is an example of a perception system that's built modularly out of existing pre-trained models. Now they're all like a year and a half out of date, so there's a new version. But what this does, so this is a system that takes one image, RGB and depth, and based with objects that it hasn't seen before, and based on some kind of pre-trained cultural knowledge in a way of the shapes of objects, is able to infer a segmentation and essentially shapes of the objects. And so this kind of perceptual processing gives us confidence that in fact the model-based method might be really a fruitful way to approach the robotics problems. So then more recently, a couple students in our group, Wilshan and Nishant Kumar, have taken a model-based planning system that gets input roughly like the input that I showed you, and calls a spatial planning and reasoning method to decide how to achieve a goal, and compare it to a currently roughly state-of-the-art method that's completely trained end-to-end. So you'll see in this video and the next one, a situation where we gave both models the goal, placed the peanut butter crackers onto the tray, and we set them starting. You'll see that immediately the model-free method starts to behave, while our model-based method is still doing some perceptual processing and some reasoning. But having done so, it finds the crackers and puts them in the bin. The other guy seems to have the crackers. We've now sped that one up by 8 because it's kind of still not getting to where it's supposed to go. So it has some idea about how to behave, but it doesn't seem quite as goal-directed as we'd like. And here's another example. Here we were supposed to put all the medicine in the box. Again, these are new objects to the system. They're just things that we had in the lab. And it's doing, again, perception of the scene and reasoning. The other one has started behaving, and it seems to have an edge in a way. But then it possibly lost the edge. There are actually 3 boxes of 3 medicine units in the scene, and it was a pre-trained model that identified the objects and helped build the model that the model-based method is using. So this is not anti-neural networks. It's just a little bit possibly illustrating that the end-to-end approach is at least not yet capable as this is for solving problems that are in its worldview. Okay, so now back to Nancy, who's been studying this phenomenon in humans.
I love that part. Just going to let it run because it's so funny.
Nancy loves watching the robot fail. It's trying.
Okay, so how do we look at this in humans? Well, we've been using the tasks that I described before. This is Arian Zaroufi's work. So he puts people in VR, and they see a scene like this with nice stereo, and they're asked which object to move to find the orange. They're told that the orange could have been dropped anywhere on the table at random. And so the VR setup enables us to measure everything, the reaction time for them to first act, the hand trajectory, the head movement, eye movements, all of that. And we can do this even with objects that are not familiar. So random blobby objects like this that people have never seen before. A much bigger challenge for 3D shape perception if you don't already have a stored knowledge of that object. So here's what it looks like to do this task. This is a lab member doing the task in VR, and in the inset is what he sees. So this is the find the banana task. There's many variants of this task. And so they just reach out and choose which object to move. Okay, so how does human behavior in this task compare to various models? So the first thing we want to know is, this is first just looking at which object do they move first. So the first thing is that humans are fairly consistent. They tend to choose the same first object. That's good, otherwise there'd be nothing to study. And the consistency between humans is greater than the consistency between humans and a random model. That's also good. But it's also not just a matter of choosing the object that occupies more pixels in the image. But actually, even if you try a model-free system like GPT-5, what it does is very different from humans, low correspondence with human behavior. But when we look at the model-based system that Arian built, which is very closely resembles Leslie's system here, that one that estimates the 3D structure of the world and then does spatial reasoning based on that 3D structure, its correspondence to humans is pretty good. And so we still need to do the end-to-end version of this. That requires a vast amount of compute. We haven't to make millions of these images. We will do it. I suspect it will be much lower correspondence. Okay, so what does all this say? It says model-based systems outperform model-free systems in robots, as Leslie showed. They better explain human behavior, as these data show. And I want to note that another interesting similarity between robots and humans is modular organization. So as Leslie mentioned, her system has all these different parts that do different parts of the problem of visually guided action planning. And it works better with those modular components, and many of those modular components are themselves individually trained end-to-end, but you need that structure to put them together. And similarly, one of the big results of the last 30 years of cognitive neuroscience is that brains too are modularly organized with different bits that do different things. And so engineers and evolutionary biologists have long speculated about the advantages of modular design. To review those briefly, individual modules can be implemented, tested, and validated independently. Same thing in evolution, they can be evolved independently. Second, modularizing a learning problem can exponentially reduce the training data required. It can probably also make evolution more efficient. Third, we can potentially assemble new systems out of existing parts by wiring them up in different ways. So we can take these modular components and string them together in different ways to get them to do different things. And different modules can entail different implementation strategies. So some of these might be individually trained end-to-end, others might have some kind of Bayesian reasoning, some kind of structure. They can each be different inside. So that's cool. But it's worth knowing which of these brain regions might be relevant to the embodied intelligence that we're talking about in this mission. And so Josh and I have been collaborating for a while, looking at brain regions that seem to be involved in these tasks. And so we've used his favorite tower task here, where we scan people with functional MRI where we ask them either, when the tower falls, will there be more blocks on the red side or the green side? Or we ask them a control task matched for difficulty. are there more blue or yellow blocks in the tower? And in that contrast, we see this set of parietal and frontal brain regions in pretty much everybody. And in a very different contrast, where we just show people videos of physical events unfolding like that, versus show them videos of social events unfolding like that, we see much more activation for the physical than social videos, and notably, lots of other parts of the brain are much more interested in the social videos than the physical ones. So it's not just that the physical ones are more interesting. Pramod over here published recently a cool paper where he showed that these same regions predict what will happen next. So if you show people a video like this, where you can kind of anticipate what will happen next, and you look at the pattern of response in those parts of the brain, you can see that they're basically extracting the prediction of an impending collision like that. So these findings are consistent with the hypothesis that these brain regions implement a model-based understanding of the physical world that we can use for prediction and planning. Georgina has a poster that Josh already mentioned, showing that VJEPA does a very bad job at predicting this outcome from that prediction. You can go to her poster and learn about that. And I want to mention an exciting new collaboration in which we are recording from individual neurons in the human brain in people doing these kinds of tasks. And this is work with Richard Anderson at Caltech, who has set up this amazing system where he's working towards developing brain-machine interfaces for humans. And he has a number of human participants who are quadriplegic from usually spinal cord injuries, who have volunteered to participate in these studies by having Utah arrays, sets of electrodes implanted chronically in their brains. And so I had the amazing opportunity to go out to Caltech and work with one of his postdocs, and we found that an electrode array up right here in the parietal region responds, this is time on this axis, much more when this guy was doing the tower falling task than the tower color task here. Replicating what we saw with functional MRI, but this is now from a single electrode representing just one or two different neurons. Similarly, when the same guy looked at the physical videos versus social videos, the same electrode responds much more to the physical than social. In fact, it does not respond any more to the social videos than it does when he's staring at a dot, astonishingly to me. Okay, so what this means is that we can now see the neural code and watch it change over time, enabling us to more precisely characterize the neural computations underlying intelligent behavior. So briefly on the next steps, the first thing we want to do is explore intelligent exploration in both robots and people. And that means not just deciding what actions to take to achieve your immediate goal, but what actions to take to collect the new information that you need. So how do we know where to explore? And so Leslie's been working on this.
Thanks. So we have been taking that modular architecture that Nancy showed you and actually instantiating it, so with the perception part, but also with memory and a spatial representation of where the robot has looked around in the world. And so I'll show you an example. It's shown in simulation here, but we're actively working on getting it to work on real robots. So the robot starts out, it's told to put a magenta object on a blue one. It starts out not knowing what's around it. So it willfully looks, and you can see that it's kind of dissipating the fog, which is the part that it hasn't seen yet. It found the magenta object, now it's just found the blue object, made sure that it would have space to go over there, and pick the object up and put it down. So part of this is reasoning about space, reasoning about what we've seen, remembering that an object we saw over there still is there after we turn here and come back to it, understanding that we have to, let's say, observe an object carefully so that we can pick it up reliably and so on. So this integrates a lot of reasoning about uncertainty. And we're going to extend this. Nancy will talk about building models that extend this to humans.
And so with humans, we want to have richer dynamic physical scenarios and to test those models against brains and also against human behavior. So for example, here's work that Beckett Roberge is doing, and he'll have a demo out with the posters. So he's made more complex VR tasks in which, for example, you're asked to catch this object by contacting it with your hand. And there's all kinds of occlusions and physical events that are required to do that, enabling us to ask how models and humans compare in their ability to solve these tasks. And the final ongoing step is that we're using the modular organization of the brain to inform modular architectures for robots. And so Leslie and I have just started a working group on that topic. That's all.